All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for attending today's webinar on ERate, CIPA, and what you should know about both, brought to you by EdgeWave and DataLink Networks. We'll have time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, so please enter your questions into the question window on the right side of your screen. And please mute your phones to avoid outside noise. Today's presenters are Mike Fleetwood, Senior Business Development and Services Manager with Synex. Mike is an ERate and K-12 technology expert. And Farley Stewart, Vice President of Product Management at EdgeWave. Farley is a cybersecurity expert. The topics we'll be covering today are, 1, how to take advantage of ERate, grants, and other funding opportunities. 2, how to move to a cloud-based learning and communication platform. And 3, how technology can enforce CIPA and FERPA. There will be a lot of information covered in today's webinar, so we've attached a printable copy of the presentation on the right side of your screen. You should see it under the handouts. You should be able to click it and download it, so your hand won't need to cramp from taking notes from all the good information received today. And with that being said, I will hand it over to Mike Fleetwood.
Great, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for joining us today. My quick agenda is just going to be what is ERate and why do we care? How it's changed over the years, what are the other funding opportunities that might be of benefit for us out there, cloud-based learning and communication platforms, FERPA, which is regulatory security guidelines, how we intend to deal with the take-home device phase that's going on in public education today, and being prepared. Next slide. So really, ERate program. ERate was started in 1996 as part of the Universal Services School and Libraries discount mechanism. It was part of the Telecommunication Act, and really the intent was that it would fund schools and libraries for internet and telecommunication services to provide better services. Originally, it started out in a lot of the rural areas, but it was quickly adapted in the urban areas. And ERate has changed over the years. My first introduction to ERate was I got hired as a tech coordinator for 7 schools in West Central Illinois, and immediately had to learn ERate to try to adopt funding and our budget towards the ERate funding. Universal Services Fund is actually who manages that. So if you wonder, where does this money come from? It actually comes from you. On the bottom of every phone bill, there is a Universal Services Fund, a tax that's put on to telecommunication services that are then pooled into a large fund, and they are divvied out year by year for schools, libraries, rural health care, and other services that USAC provides. Next slide. So these discounts that schools get are based on a free and reduced lunch numbers. Now, that is not the only way that you can show need to USAC, but that is the most widely used way to measure your poverty level and the students in your population that need free and reduced lunch assistance. That level is then measured into your reimbursement level from ERate, and those discounts range anywhere from 20 to 90% of the total cost of the products and the services that the ERate will pay for, USAC will pay for. So that doesn't mean that if 20% of your student population accepts free and reduced lunch that your numbers are automatically 80%. There is a calculator that you use, and you work with the USAC website, or you work with independent consultants to help determine your level of reimbursement. But it's a great way of getting funding for your school. Over the years, there's been, I would say, dissatisfaction with how the funding went. It seemed that many of the same schools got money, and a lot of the schools with needs that were in some of the rural areas or the smaller districts never got funding. So there's been a lot of improvement and a lot of changes over the last couple of years to try to assist everybody in taking advantage of this money. So if you're one of the schools that really hasn't done ERate for a while, it may be time to get back into the game. This last year's funding was $3.9 billion, and as of July, when I was at the USAC training, they announced that every school that had turned in a 471 correctly were being funded this year. So it's really changed the game quite a bit. They've done away with some of the services. They've enhanced a lot of the regulations on who can get money. So if you're one of those schools that in the past have really given up because it's a lot of work for very little benefit, I would say it's time to take a look again and see what you might be able to benefit from E-rate funding. Next slide. So who qualifies? Well, K through 12 schools, public or private. There's been a misnomer, and I've spent a lot of time talking with a lot of private schools that say, well, we're not eligible. Well, that's really not the case. There may be certain levels of funding that you're eligible for. There may be different rules on how you measure your need, but you're still eligible. So even if you're a private faith-based organization or charter school, you are still eligible for E-rate. You want to work with a consultant that can help you with that. Public libraries are also funded. Many schools have looked for ways to provide hotspot devices for their students so they have internet at home. A lot of our school population don't have internet at home, and in order to move to a cloud-based learning platform or help students do work from home, they have to have internet. So a lot of schools are partnering up with public libraries to use federal grants and E-rate money to help provide hotspots that the libraries can check out to students that don't have internet access. If you're looking in those to provide those services for your students, there's a great opportunity with current library funding and E-rate. And again, I would suggest we follow up this call with Data Link and a lot of the folks that are on this call, and let's figure out what would be a good plan for you. Non-for-profits are also eligible. We've seen a lot of behavioral health services and a lot of mental health facilities that specialize in special learning or special education. They are also funded. So the only thing is you have to have an endowment less than $50 million. But if you fit into that, you are fundable for E-rate. And then consortiums. A consortium is any combination of the above that might work together to get funding for their specific library, school, or a charter school, or even a nonprofit organization. Next slide, please. So there are really two types of services that are being provided. One is called Category 1, which telecommunication, internet, voice over IP, and basic internet access, firewall, all wireless service that is not internal but wireless to your building is all fundable under the Category 1 of eligible products. So this particular Category 1 is being reduced over the next few years. What happened was a lot of schools, a lot of the money was being used up totally in funding voice services and 800 numbers and a lot of things that the E-rate USAC has really scaled back on. So there's a lot of changes out there. As I said, if you haven't looked at this in a while, you may want to get back in and figure out how this will work for you. But a lot of the Category 1 services are being reduced. Each year, the percentage of funding is going to be reduced over the next 4 years, and then it will be going away. So it might be a good time for you to get some of the funding now because it's going away soon. Next slide, please. So Category 2, basically Category 2 is any services that would assist in providing that internet to the end user, except for the end user device. Any cabling, connectors, caching servers, so that as you're moving towards a web-based application, caching servers are still fun. So you can actually speed up the performance of your internet pipe by caching websites that they're visiting on a regular basis in a caching server, so it delivers it to your end user in a quicker fashion. Software to support eligible equipment is also fundable. Any kind of router software or any kind of specialized network management software. LAN and wireless LAN, so all of your switches, your hubs, your routers, your access points, anything that's required to get that to the end device is fundable. Firewalls, there's more and more security issues inside of a school network. A lot of times over the years, schools never thought that security was a real issue for them. But with FERPA and CIPA and a lot of the regulatory stuff that's coming out, schools need to be thinking about the security of their student data and their employees' data as well. So more and more services are being thrown into the firewall. Any battery backup that provides service to those devices is also fundable. And then basic maintenance of eligible equipment. So what that means is not necessarily managed services where you're actually monitoring it and reporting it, but more updates, keeping the code updated, making sure that you're running the newest version of the software, maintaining the RAM and all of the stuff that makes it all work is under a maintenance contract. So you can cover it for warranty, you can cover it for updates and services, you can even cover it for on-site coming in and replacing switches that go down. But all of those things were intended to keep the equipment that was funded by ERate around and performing a little bit longer. Next slide, please. So one of the things that has really changed is these are all a list of services that are no longer being performed as of last July 1, 2015. You'll notice under the Category 1, all the custom calling services, direct inward dialing, directory assistant charges, all of the text messaging, voicemail, web hosting, which was huge. All of that has been removed from funding for 2015. On the Category 2 side is where the biggest impact is. No longer are servers, software, storage devices, any telephone components, any of the video components, all of that stuff has been removed with the specific effect that it's going to be spent on the infrastructure, the wired and wireless infrastructure, internet bandwidth, and the servers and stuff are no longer being funded. So a lot of the intent is that you're moving to a cloud-based solution like a Google, like a Microsoft. There's such good services being offered now out in the cloud, but in order to do that, the network has to be strong and your internet pipe has to be very strong. So that's where they're putting their money into. Next slide, please. So what is ineligible? And you know, again, no end devices are fundable. So any monitors, speakers, projectors, whiteboards, laptops, any of that stuff that you would consider as a end user device is not fundable under the ERate program. The other thing that's very difficult to deal with is the network security and the content filtering. Now, network security means that the firewall is fundable. The security that protects the internet is fundable, but any of the managed service type processes that would happen on the network itself are not fundable. Content filtering is not fundable, which is very confusing because it's mandated under CIPA that you cannot be eligible for ERate without internet filtering, but they do not pay for it. So I know there's been a lot of questions, and they're good questions. Why, if it's required, is it not paid for? And I think that's a valid question, and it's a good one, but you'll have to talk to USAC and ERate on that, because even at the last event that I went to, they said for the future they could not see content filtering being funded. So it's something that a school must have, must invest with, but cannot be provided through ERate. The other proposed modernization changes is really the paging and the telephone components, the email, web hosting, voicemail, all that's going away. They're no longer funding that. So if you're looking at that funding, the idea is improve your network, improve your internet bandwidth, and really focus on that piece, because that's where ERate's going. Next. So competitive bid process. ERate is about competitive bidding. It's open to all bidding. So in order to be eligible for ERate, you must accept all bids. Even though you have a particular relationship or you have a particular past history with a provider, you must accept all bids and you must measure them all equally. You have to create what's called a matrix on how you measure every proposal, and that matrix must have the highest weighted measurement, must be price. But that doesn't mean that you always have to buy the lowest price, because if the highest weighted measurement is price, but relationship and expertise and proximity and other things like that are written out on your matrix, you can still award business to a company that may not be the lowest price, but weights higher in every other field. However, that matrix must be copied. You must be able to include that to USAC if they request it, and you have to keep records of every bid and every measurement tool that you used in determining what the right solution is. There were a lot of misuses of ERate funding in the past, so it's very important that you stay on the up and up and keep all your records and make it very understandable if they request some information from you. Next slide, please. So the rules, gifts to applicants. This is where we have a lot of conversation. You know, you can only get gifts from a prospective quoter or prospective reseller at $20 per incident per person max. $50 per year per person max. That includes meals, raffles, handouts, trainings. So a lot of our resellers will throw an event and they'll invite a bunch of schools and they'll have them raffle off a printer or a Chromebook. Well, if that exceeds the requirements, that makes you ineligible to bid on their product. So charitable donations must benefit the entire school and the library. It can't be singled out to decision makers or specific individuals. It cannot influence or appear to influence any bid selection at all. And it cannot reduce or eliminate debt or payments. So you can't give somebody a reseller cannot give somebody a laptop and have them wipe off services that they did under ERate funding. That makes you ineligible, it makes them ineligible, and it may risk your funding. Don't want to sell by fear, but just be aware there are rules if you're getting back in this game. There's not many rules, but there are some. Be knowledgeable. Understand what you're getting into. Next slide, please. So the process is this slide. You know, 470 is what you do. Funding opens up July 1. It just opened up for 2016 in July 1. You put out a 470 that says, this is my wish list. I wish we could do this. The 470s are put out on the web. They must be out for 28 days, and they have to be posted 28 days before you can accept a 471 or choose a quote for a 471. 471 window opens in early January, and it has to be turned in and closed by mid-March. Then you find out by July 1 if you're receiving funding for that next year. So next slide, please. So it's a process that's a year long, and you need to be in the game. So the modernization of ERate is just to change the funding and help schools get more money for what they really need, which is bandwidth and network connectivity. Next slide. So if any additional information, you're going to get the slide deck. Here's how you can contact USAC for anything that you need from them. Next slide, please. So what other things do we need to know? I mean, the title funding. A lot of times there's great title funding coming in that you can request. There's a lot of professional development budgets going on in schools right now, trying to teach their teachers how to use these devices for their day-to-day instruction. There's educational grants. There's corporate grants. The PTA and PTO often are a very influential organization inside of a school that can help with fundraising. If any of these things you need assistance with, please contact the folks at Data Link Networks. They can absolutely get some experts on the phone and assist you with that. Next slide, please. So how is cloud-based learning going to help schools? Well, for one, funding and budget efficiencies. Over the years, maintaining operating systems and network servers and storage and backup and antivirus, it has eaten up a lot of IT budget. So cloud-based learning, like cloud-based systems like Office 365 and Google have really provided a tremendous service to education. So we're seeing a lot of folks move to that. Every user with either solution, every user on that domain with either solution gets a terabyte of storage in the cloud, not just storage of Office 365 documents or Google documents, but anything they need to store. So if you do the math and you figure out for every student, if you tried to provide them on-premise terabyte of storage, you will find that the budget really pushes you to the web. Reducing cost to support systems. Helping teachers assess. There's a lot of analytics out there now. There's testing requirements that have to be done. You need to be able to assess the students and then deliver instruction and test them to see how well your instruction has gotten them ready. Those tools are available through both Microsoft and Google out in the cloud and really provide a lot of services at free or very reduced price for our schools. Charging devices are critical. How do you teach instruction with devices if they're not ready for classroom time? So battery levels and everything are very critical as you're looking for devices to run into the school. Damage to the devices and how long it takes to prepare loaners and how well you can manage any kind of warranty issues and everything. That's critical for this whole ecosystem, so it's very important to think about. The security of the device is huge in schools. You don't want to give students devices that compromise their security, their information, their personality. You really don't want to do that. I know schools, that's the last thing they want to do. So having those discussions up front about the security are critical. And then all of it works with wireless. Most Chromebooks, tablets, iPads and laptops, very few of them come with Ethernet ports anymore. It's really being pushed to a wireless infrastructure, not just a wireless infrastructure built on connectivity, but a wireless infrastructure that is built on density. How many devices can I serve on my wireless access? A lot of schools were built just trying to make sure they could get coverage everywhere in the building. But if you can't cover the total population because your density numbers are low, it's as ineffective as not being able to connect at all. And then you must stay focused on ERate. ERate is pushing you to the cloud. They are taking away a lot of those services because they know these offerings are out there and they are free. Next slide, please. So the classroom's changing. It's all about positive learning anymore. No longer can schools afford, the high expensive IT folks. They're looking for help. They're needing to add instructional technology specialists. They're trying to reduce their classroom disruption by offering blended learning and differentiated learning inside of the mainstream classroom. A lot of schools have pulled special education back into the mainstream, so teachers are challenged to provide different levels of instruction inside that physical class. The roles of teachers are changing. They're turning into facilitators now instead of deliverers. Increased efficiency of project-based learning. That's where the cloud really offers a lot of advantage. Kids can collaborate on single projects together and teachers can get in and give feedback. Everything needs to be easy to understand and easy to maintain. And when I say easy to understand, I'm not talking about the kids. Our kids learn stuff very quickly these days. They're online all the time. But our teachers, if they're going to be asked to go forward and start delivering instruction with technology, they've got to have something that's easy for them to use. And then if our students are going to keep up today, it can't be about the only study is done inside the four walls. We have to extend the classroom. We have to extend the learning environment outside the classroom, and that's where a lot of web-based and cloud-based solutions can provide services. Next slide, please. So FERPA, what is it? You guys probably already know this. You're already dealing with this, but it's a Protection, Family Education, Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So all transcripts, all grades, free and reduced lunch program, all medical history, it all has to be maintained. And it's a very difficult thing. Schools were not intended to have to worry about all this stuff originally. IT folks a lot of times are, in some of the smaller districts, they're English teachers a couple hours and then they're taking care of their IT. This requires a lot of security and a lot of protection. That's where it's time to reach out to your experts at EdgeWave and Data Link Networks and ask them to assist you with your privacy and security needs. Next slide. So CIPA, Children's Internet Protection Act. It was enacted by Congress in 2000. The whole idea is to protect the kids from the stuff that's out on the internet. Well, that's a very challenging thing when you're being pushed to get kids on the internet for the information that they need to do their instruction, but yet you're worried about protecting them. Again, a lot of times the schools, unless you're a big district, you really cannot afford to have security experts on your team. That's when you really need to reach out to the folks that will be following me and talking about their services and what they can do for you in your school. Next slide, please. So that's just a little bit more about that. It's just to protect identity, stop them from hacking, all the things that you need to worry about, how they're protecting themselves in chat rooms and electronic email, all these things that you're being encouraged to have students utilize now brings a level of security and sophistication, and the experts on this call would be able to help you with that. Next slide, please. Well, guys, last and not least, I know I've used up an extra minute of my time, but do your homework. There are a lot of great things being done by a lot of schools out there. If you're not prepared, you have great schools and people around you that are doing this all the time. You have professional consultants like are on this phone that are more than happy to help you. You know, look at what your peers are doing. There's where the answers are, but pick good partners and pick good products. You can't apologize enough for choosing price if it doesn't perform. We all could be riding bicycles to work every day, but we don't. We drive cars because we determine that our time is more valuable getting to where we need to go and being effective at what we're trying to do. The same analogy is with your technology. Don't cut corners just for price. Be price conscious, but choose good partners and good products that'll help you achieve your educational goals and create a test for success. Don't run into something full bore without bearing it out, running a good test, doing a proof of concept, and making sure it's going to get you what you need. Well, guys, I appreciate your time. I hope there was something of value. And now I'm going to turn it over to our next presenter. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you, Mike. That was some awesome information. Fabulous presentation there. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today. I really appreciate you joining. It's great to speak to this audience. This kind of brings me back to my roots. So my name is Farley Stewart. I'm VP of Product Management. I mentioned it brings me back to my roots because before EdgeWave, I actually founded the company that introduced our iPrism web security product. And that company was really focused back in the mid-90s, actually even early 90s. Our primary mission was connecting schools to the internet. We worked with a lot of K-12 school districts, and we worked with some community colleges, and that was our primary focus. And back in the mid-90s, it was a lot more challenging to get on the internet than it is today. You had to deal with everything from, how do I set up DNS and email and get a web server, to things like, what is a firewall? How do I use it? How do I connect with it? So things you're dealing with today, but are much more complex. So we work with schools. We help them get connected to the internet. Now, inevitably, the next conversation was something like this. We really love that virtual frog dissection website, and it's great, and we're using it in our classroom. But how do we keep the kids away from the inappropriate stuff that's on the internet? So with that, we had developed our iPrism product, which was really the first web filtering appliance of the day. And it was really designed to help keep schools and kids safe online. This was developed and introduced well before CIPA came into play, but certainly today it's a key component to help schools be CIPA compliant and enforce their acceptable use policies. Education is the largest segment we serve. It represents about 30% of our account base, and the companies continue to evolve. So there's a lot of new capabilities and technologies that we bring to bear to help schools with a number of challenges that they face today. So what are some of those challenges? Well, if you look at things like web, for example, as Mike mentioned, ERate's great and going to provide a lot of money to fund some very, very important projects, but it does have a requirement. It requires that the school is CIPA compliant. So schools need to be able to address that regulation. Another aspect of that is even if you're able to keep folks out of inappropriate materials on their websites, one of the things that's happened is SSL, and particularly its impact on safe search for schools. SSL is encrypted web traffic, and about 30 to 40% of website traffic today is encrypted using HTTPS or SSL. What that means is that there's no visibility into that, so you don't really know where students are going when they're on the internet. You might see the top level site, but you really don't understand the pages that are happening below that, and you don't understand the content that they're seeing there. And it has particular ramifications when you come to Google and safe search. Google, a little while back, started redirecting all of their web traffic to HTTPS, SSL encrypted traffic, and that includes all of their search, whether it be search or image search. So what that meant is if you're not in the position that you can inspect that traffic, even though you're stopping from going to pornography, for example, it's pretty easy to go to Google's image search and type in a few words and pretty much see whatever you want to see. So it's an incredibly important problem that schools have to deal with today. It also leads right into the issue of malware. Malware has evolved significantly. The quantity of malware and the velocity of new malware creation and the complexity of the malware and the sophistication are risen to levels we've never seen anywhere close to today, and it continues to be on an upward trend. These are all areas that schools have to deal with. So we've introduced iPrism Web Security a while back, but we've completely rewritten the product and released it this year with our 8.0 release. Adding a number of really key elements. Certainly one of the areas that it helps you is for acceptable use policy enforcement. So it allows you to monitor access in terms of where students are going, provide reporting for compliance reasons, and to be able to block any type of access that does not conform with your acceptable use policy. So that can allow you to be CIPA compliant or implement other aspects of what you consider deemed acceptable for your school. On the SSL and safe search side, we do full SSL inspection. What that means is that as the traffic is leaving your organization, if it's encrypted, we will actually de-encrypt it. We will actually look at the content. That allows us to log and report on all of the URLs where school students are going, even those that are contained within an encryption connection. And then more importantly, or equally importantly, it allows us to enforce safe search. So now if you're going to Google and you're over an encrypted channel, we can enforce it so that safe search parameters are still utilized and what you get back is a safe search. It can also allow us to look at files that are coming down. So this ties into the malware side. Most organizations today are completely blind to SSL traffic. That means they don't see 30 to 40% of the traffic. If somebody downloads a file over an encrypted traffic, their gateway products do not scan that, but iPrism will. So iPrism allows you to not only prevent students from going to bad websites based on the URL, knowing where we have malicious websites, preventing that. Certainly we do that. But in addition, we look at all the information that's downloaded from the internet. We scan it in real time for malware viruses. Another area of challenges is on the email side. As Mike mentioned, there's FERPA compliance requirements. This typically involves making sure that student information is safe and secure, and also has to do with how you are able to retain that information. So making sure emails, for example, if you're sending the information are encrypted, making sure that they're stored and able to be retained. The third area really is phishing and malware. Email is the tip of the spear when it comes to launching an attack on our organization. It's about 1 out of 4 times that successful breaches of organizations start with somebody clicking on an email link. So you need to be able to stop these phishing attacks that are aimed at getting into the organization. They're aimed at stealing information, revealing student information that shouldn't be revealed, and basically exposing confidential information within your organization. So Our ePrism email security solution provides email encryption that can help you with FERPA requirements. It can allow you to encrypt email in 3 different types of ways to make sure that basically whatever you send is secure and stays secure. We also have an archiving capability. This will allow you to store, this is cloud-based, to allow you to store all your inbound and outbound emails, and you'll store it in the cloud according to whatever retention policy you would care to implement, and then you'll be able to access the email whenever you need it as a alternative form of storage for the email or for legal and compliance reasons. And then on the malware and phishing side, we have what we call zero-minute defense. If you look at the way malware happens, you'll probably understand that campaigns aren't static. Campaigns are constantly changing in a very dynamic way. So a lot of technology just tries to stop it, just with technology alone. But at EdgeWave, what's fundamental to our philosophy is that we believe that not only do you need threat intelligence and great machine or artificial intelligence that can help augment the products, that needs to be combined with humans. So we actually have 24/7 human analysis that actually looks at traffic flows and new campaigns that are happening in email and are making constant adjustments throughout the day and night to be able to attack and address these types of phishing and malware campaigns. On the network side, there's a number of things as well. The number of applications that people are running has just skyrocketed. Things like, is this traffic that's going over the web, is it Facebook? Is it Dropbox? Is it Twitter? Is it a BitTorrent? Is it some peer-to-peer traffic? Is somebody trying to get around my security controls? Huge issue today, tons and tons of applications. Often schools lose visibility into that. There's also a lot of solutions that you're having to deal with. Firewalls are one thing, but you may have secure access via VPN. You may need some type of intrusion prevention system as part of your network, and that may be a separate system. You may have some type of gateway AV scanning to prevent malware, and certainly you probably have some type of URL solution. That's a lot for schools to manage. The other aspect is as you create policies, it takes some time, and understanding all that can take a lot of time. In fact, managing all these solutions is time, and I know time is certainly, as I've worked with schools, not something that people have a lot of. Wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot of functions, doing some great work. Time is certainly not something you have a lot of. So we have what we call our EPIC Next Generation Firewall. And one of the key aspects of our firewall is the ability to identify applications. We identify over 6,000 applications so that you can use the application identification to be able to see what traffic is really happening and what's really running on your network. And you can use that as part of your policy to control what applications should be allowed and which ones you want to deny. So you can get into that application visibility, use it in reporting, and use it in the way that you control that traffic. We have as part of the next generation firewall, there are a number of capabilities that are included. These are, as Mike mentioned, the firewall is fundable for ERate, and then some of the other capabilities that are add-ons are not, but they are available to you. So basic firewall capability, keeping people out of your network and segmenting your network and your DMZs are certainly there. But in addition to that, we have intrusion prevention that's part of it. We have content scanning from an AV and malware perspective, and we have URL filtering that's part of it. Also VPN connectivity. So those are all together, and unlike older style firewalls or UTMs, where if you turn this functionality on, they slow to a crawl. This is built on a single pass architecture, meaning a firewall can actually do what we call 6 dimensions of analysis, looking at the application, looking at the content that's coming through, looking at the user that's accessing it, looking at time, and even location of destination. It can do all of that in a single pass architecture at very high performance, and it's all managed from a single pane, meaning it makes it much, much easier for you to develop very sophisticated policies that really do with the firewall what you want it to do. The third aspect of this is that as policies develop, they're not static. Security policies change in a constant state. It often takes a lot of time to go back and try to figure out what was the other policy that I'd set before. How does that conflict as my new policy? Maybe I open something up. Maybe I close something else off, right? So the ability for you to reconcile all of those policies together can be a really huge issue. So the firewall we have actually has this intelligent capability where it can actually look at the policies and it can actually determine where there might be overlapping aspects of it, and probably even more importantly, things that are maybe unrepresented. It will actually look at the traffic flows and then suggest to you things that you might want to actually tune maybe a little tighter to potentially block down some things that might be security issues for your organization. That makes it much easier and saves a lot of administrative time in getting the policies right. So with that, I want to summarize just real briefly, so what EdgeWave is really about, what differentiates us, is this notion of being able to use threat intelligence, artificial intelligence, combined with humans that do 24/7 analysis to really get that extra 2 to 3% that makes things really, really effective. And we combine that to all of our products, our iPrism Web Security, ePrism Email Security, our Epic Next Generation Firewall, and a fourth product that I didn't talk about today called our Epic Security Assurance Services, which is really designed around breach identification. So with that, I certainly want to thank you all for joining. We are going to take questions after this if there's any questions that happen, but I certainly encourage you to contact our partner, Data Link Network, if you would like to learn more about any of the solutions that EdgeWave offers. That'll turn it back to Patrick, and we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Thanks, Farley. Thanks, Mike. That's some great information. So let's now open up to questions. So please submit your questions to the toolbar on the right. And also use this as one last chance to download the printable format of this presentation. So lots of good content, and so you didn't have to take copious notes to get the full benefit. Are there any questions? So I don't see any questions coming in. So everybody, thank you so much for attending. We will also follow up this webinar with an email containing an on-demand version of the recording of the webinar if you want to share it with any coworkers or colleagues as well. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.